Everyone quiet. Shh. We're up to Daf Yomi Aleph. The Gemara, it's about 9 lines into the page. Just to review what the Gemara had said, the Gemara was discussing about how to calculate nezek. So the Gemara brought down a brisa. The purpose of bringing down the brisa was because it was Abaya's way of refuting Rava, that Rava said that there's a distinction between the behema being mazik, that when a behema is mazik, mechubel karka, you don't pay for, according to the Tanakama, you don't pay for what it destroyed. You figure out the shishim cheshbon, you figure out the value of a saw based on 60 sawim, and then you do the value of the saw with the damage, without the damage. That was the cheshbon by behemas. And then Rava felt, but when people are mazik, there's a distinction. Fine. Abaya says to Rava, you're incorrect. Why? What's your cheshbon of making a distinction that by people there's no shishim? Meaning by people, if you destroy a tree, you pray for the tree. What's your cheshbon? Because when the brisa describes paying for a mazik biyadayim of bidei adam, it doesn't mention shishim. The truth is, we quote this long brisa. It didn't say shishim by the brisa either. So you have to add shishim by behemoths, you have to add shishim by adam. But because we mentioned this brisa, we're going to analyze this brisa a little bit more today. So the Gemara says like this. We're up to Nun Testament Aleph. Amar Abaya. It's the first word online is Abaya. It's about 10 lines into the page. Amar Abaya. Rav Yosi Haglili, Rav Yishmael Amru Davar Echad. Rav Yosi Haglili from the previously quoted brisa and Rav Yishmael both say the same thing. Now, what was Rav Yosi Haglili Shita? Rav Yosi Haglili Shita was in the end of Nun Chesam at Beis. The Gemara said that if you eat a chaziz, it's fresh, like freshly sprouted grain, so it's not really valuable. It's like barely ripe, but it's not something you would buy. So Rav Yosi said, here's what we do: you wait till the end of the graining season, okay? Figure out that plot of land that you destroyed, figure out when it's fully ripe, the value, and then you pay for that. Meaning, although you destroyed barely budding grain, you're paying for what it will be. Okay, so the Gemara says, so Abaya says, Rav Yosi Haglili, Rav Yishmael Amr Davrecha. That sheet of Rav Yosi Haglili is also Rav Yishmael. Rav Yosi Haglili Ad Amr. Now, Rav Yosi Haglili we just quoted. That again, you destroyed barely ripe grain, but you're going to pay for what it will be, fully ripe. And meaning we just assume that because you cut it down, you didn't let it get there. We assume that it will be. Rabbi Shmuel also says the same thing. Rabbi Shmuel, where's Rabbi Shmuel? The Tani is in the Brisa. Meitav Sadeu. So we've had this Brisa many times. I would ask where it is, but it's not like there's anybody here who knows. No, it's been a couple times. I can tell you that. Now this Brisa, every time we quoted it, we explained it one way. Now we're going to be explaining it a different way. There's a machlokes. The pasuk says Meitav Sadeu. If the animal causes damage by eating or shein v'regel, it says meitav sadeu, meitav karmi yishalem. Says Rabbi Yishmael, meitav sadeu shal nizik, and meitav karmi shal nizik. You pay with the value, the choices of the nizik, the choices of the victim. That's Rabbi Yishmael. Rabbi Akiva says, he says, no. It's only the purpose of the pasuk is for you to pay for idis and kavachayim behegdish. Now, what exactly is the machlokes? So we've had this a couple times already. The conclusion of the Gemara is always, at least to my knowledge, again, I legitimately am not trying to kibbutz adovi. I didn't check this out, but from my knowledge, the machlokes was a case where the idis of the nizik is equal to the beinanis of the mazik. So the question is, can he give his beinanis, or does he have to give his idis? The Gemara has a completely different approach to the machlokes now. The Gemara says it's not that. Tosfos says it could be. The Gemara means it's that and what we're going to explain. But the Gemara completely does not mention that being the possibility. So what is the machlokes, Rabbi Shmuel and Rabbi Akiva? So the Gemara says, Loi temek Rav Yidi bar Ravin. Do not explain like Rav Yidi bar Ravin. Rav Yidi bar Ravin was a third explanation, which the Gemara rejects. What was the explanation of Rav Yidi bar Ravin? That again, the question is, what does Rabbi Shmuel mean? Rabbi Akiva just says, you have to pay Yidis. Okay, so that means you pay with your best land. Easy. Rabbi Shmuel says, no, meitav karmi shel nizik. So what is Rabbi Shmuel saying, and what's the machlokes? So Rav Yidi bar Ravin explained the Gemara as follows. Dam Rav Yidi bar Ravin says, Kigoin sha'achla aruga ben arugas. The case is where my animal destroyed one of your plots of land. I don't know if he destroyed beinanis, idis, I don't know what he destroyed. And the chiddush is I have to pay idis. The problem is, That's a big chiddush of Rabbi Shmuel. The problem is that's connected the rule of hameitzi mechaver olav haraya. The rule is that if you destroy something and you're not sure what you destroyed, I'm not paying for the best. Prove to me I destroyed the best before I pay for it. But that's how Rav Idi bar Ravin explains the machlekes. The Gemara rejects it. That is not how we're going to explain the machlekes, because the Amar Kim Shalem Shmeina, the Rav Idi bar Ravin explains that Rabbi Shmuel shita is that in such a situation you pay idus, and to that the Gemara says I don't like that pshat. Why? B'meik of dika hashta the hachi lo yamrina. We don't like that pshat. Why? My time. So that is not the pshat. So what is Rabbi Shmuel's shita that says meitav karmishal nizik? It means meitav dilakameh. You pay for what it will be. Meaning the case is where the animal ate freshly ripe grain. So the question is, do you pay for what it was value at the time of the destruction, or what it will be? Rabbi Shmuel says meitav karmishal nizik, meaning Rabbi Shmuel is not arguing a big machlekes. He's just saying that you pay for what it will be. That's the shita of Rabbi Shmuel. So Rabbi Shmuel is now the same thing as Rav Yossi Haglili. Okay. Make that. No, it is lo'olam. It's not like you destroyed. No, but it is sprouted though. It's not like it's a tree that might bring fruit. It's sprouted. It just didn't get to that fully ripe, sellable thing. It's a chiddush, but that's Rabbi Shmuel shita. Ela dekame umayniu keicha desalik. So right now we're saying Rabbi Shmuel and Rabbi Yossi are saying the same thing. Okay, beautiful. Now the Gemara has one quick problem. The Gemara's problem is going to be like this. If you look at the top of the Amid, we brought down the machlokes. In the Mishnah, there was a shita of Rav Shimon. Rav Shimon's shita is that when you destroy, let's say, strawberries, you don't pay for the difference in the value. You pay for strawberries. You destroyed a pound of strawberries, you pay for a pound of strawberries. Easy. That shita of Rav Shimon is not just Rav Shimon, because we said in the top of the Amid, achla smadar. Now smadar are very, very underripe grapes. Rabbi Yeshua says, Rabbi Yeshua says, the chiddush is you pay for what it will be, which is a big chiddush because it's not full. You don't do the land thing. You pay for what you destroyed. The Chum say, no, Rabbi Yeshua, the Chum say, no, do the land thing. Then, Rav Shimon ben Yehuda, Rav Shimon, Ba'medvar mum mizman she'achla lul gefanim v'yichuri te'enim. Avalacha pagim le'baisa, Rabbi Yeshua kilo anav ma'im le'batza. This shita is as follows. This shita is that Rav Shimon ben Yehuda, in the name of Rav Shimon, it's the same Rav Shimon of our Mishnah, but a slightly different understanding of it. That Rav Shimon, according to Rav Shimon Yehuda, holds like this. I agree with you that you do the land thing if it's not ripe. If it's ripe, then you pay for it as is. That's Rav Shimon ben Yehuda's shita in the name of Rav Shimon. Okay, that's fair. Here's the issue. So Rav Shimon ben Yehuda is saying in the name of Rav Shimon that if it's ripe enough, you pay. If it's not ripe, you do the land thing. Here's the problem. Grapes apparently have 3 different stages. There's the first stage, which is lulve gafanim and yichuri teinem, which is mamish, like not even sprouting. It's just the vines. That he says you do the land thing because I'm not paying for grapes yet. Then there's the opposite extreme, which is pagim meiboiser, which are significant grapes. That he says you pay for as is. What about smadar, which are in between? Smadar are where the grapes are like the size of little beans. That he's sort of skipping. And the problem is he's sort of contradicting himself. He's saying like this. When you ate the lul vegafanim, which is like the opposite extreme, then you do the land thing, which implies that if it was smadar, you would pay for as is. But then he says, if it's beiser, which is the further thing, that's when you pay for as is, which implies that smadar, you would do the land thing. So the question is, what would Reb Shimon say about smadar, which is that stage of grapes? Because he's sort of skipping it. He's going from A to C, and he's sort of skipping B. And he's saying that if it's A, if it's completely underdeveloped, you do the land, which implies that smadar, you would do the actual payment for the fruit itself. But then he says beiser, which is more developed than smadar. Then he says you pay for it, which implies that smadar you don't. So what does Reb Shimon say about smadar? So the Gemara says, Amar Mar, Rav Shimon ben Yehuda, Amar Shimon, Bamed Shachalu Gefanav Yichuritein. We ate shoots of grapevines. Hasmada, that implies, meaning that's when you do the land thing. Hasmada, which implies that if you ate budding grapes, smada are tiny, tiny little like bean-sized grapes. Then Ryan Eisen Kilo Anavim Lubatza. You pay for them not as is. You pay for them what they will be. Meaning you pay for them in the store as if they were fully developed. You don't do the land thing. You pay for them fully developed. Ema Seifa. But then look at the end of his statement. If you ate half-ripe grapes, which is way past smadar, then that's when we look at it as if it's fully developed and you go to the store. So if you eat a pound of smadar, a pound of boiser, which are half-ripe grapes, you go to the store and you say, pound of grapes, and you pay for it. So what about smadar? So smadar, he's sort of contradicting himself because he skipped that middle stage. So what would he say about smader? So the Gemara says, here's what you do. Put smader in there. There's A, B, and C, right? There's little gefanim, completely unripe. Pay for the land value. Then there's Beiser, which you definitely pay for what it will be, as is, And then there's smader. And then, so what do you do with smader? Put it in there. So what do you do? This is how you're supposed to reread the Brisa. When do you pay for the land difference in value for what you destroyed? Not for what the fruit itself, which is lul v'gefanim and yichuri te'inim. Aval ochos smadar pagin oy boiser oyin oisai ki'ilu anav ma'in libatzer. But if you ate smadar or anything past smadar, then you pay for what it will be as is. So that means, okay, fair enough. Now here's the problem. What we've just done is we made Rav Shimon Shita that if you eat a pound of smadar, which are grapes the size of a bean, you go to the store and you say, I have to pay for a pound of grapes, which is fine. That's Rav Yeshua Shita. So now Rav Shimon, right? Because the first line of the Amid is Achel Smadar, Rav Yeshua, and Rai Noisakin Amid Batzar. That's Rav Yeshua Shita. So now Rav Yeshua and Rav Shimon are saying the same thing. That's a problem. There's got to be some distinction between the two. Why would they be saying the same thing? Right, the first case of this Amid is Smadar, which Rabbi Yeshua is saying is you pay for as what they will be, and then 3 lines later you have Rav Shimon Shita, and it's Smadar and Boiser. You also pay for it. Rabbi Yeshua is now saying the exact same thing as Rav Shimon. They're both saying the same thing, which is that if you eat Smadar, which is that level of development, you pay for it as if that's considered grapes already, and then you pay for it. You don't do the land thing; you pay for them as this. So now Rabbi Yeshua and Rav Shimon are saying the same thing about Smadar. So the Gemara says. Yihachi Rav Shimon ben Yehuda, Hainu Rav Shua. So what's the difference? So the Gemara says interesting. Ikabinayu kachash gemura, kachash gufna, and that is like this. The animal ate a pound of smadar, which are little bean grapes. So they both say the same thing, which is you go to the store and you figure out the value of a pound of grapes. Here's the difference, though. As the vine supports the grapes as they grow, there's a weakening of the vine, and the value of that vine actually depreciates a little bit. The question is, do you take that into account? Meaning, do you look at it as if you have this vine which has a pound of smadar on it, and you destroy that, so you have to figure out the value. So how do you figure out the value? Do you just figure out the value of a pound of fully ripened grapes if they were on the vine? Or do you say, no, the pound of fully ripe grapes after harvesting? Because after you harvest it, there are certain costs that do go in. So it's sort of like, are you fast forwarding time in the natural order? Or are you looking as if they have grapes right here, and you don't take into account the fact that the vine will slightly depreciate? Do you take into those type of costs? That's the question. Kochash gufna. If you look at Rashi describes kochash gufna. Rashi says, Kochash gufna lenakis min hatashlumin. Do you deduct from the payment masha yachishu anovim bigafanim? The grapes will sap away a little bit of the strength of the vine. Im yamdu shamar abotzer shetamid yoinkim. So that's the question. Do you take it as if it's like fast forward in time, as if there's just fully grapes here, but you don't take into it as if you're a farmer? Or do you say no? You sort of wait till the future, then look at the value, and then go back in the time and put the value in the past. The question is, do you take into account that distinction of the weakening of the vine? So
now it's not weakened.
Correct. Right now it's not weakened because there are no grapes here. Do you just say, well, do I look as if there are grapes on the vine without the weakening, as if the grapes are right here, but in like this magical? Or do you say no? We look at it as if what will it be in 3 months? But what will it be in 3 months is different than if you just took the grapes and like magically placed it on the vine. Now, again, it's going to be a very subtle distinction. But basically, do you look at what will be and then say, well, in the natural order of events, I deprived you of what will be, well then go what will be. And in the natural order of events, there are going to be costs. So I'm not paying for those costs. That's the shaila. And the Gemara says, well, who says what? That's the difference between Rav Shimon and Rav Yeshua. But Loi Messiah, we don't know who says what though. So Rav Shimon ben Yehuda and Rav Yeshua, that's what their machlokes is. We don't know who said what though. One said one and one said the other. I don't know which one. The Gemara says, Abai Amr Messiah says, I think I could figure out the answer. How so? Basically, having a shaila of do we take into what will be in the natural order of events that you deprived, right? You cut down these grapes before they got there. So one opinion says, well, we wait for we look at what it will be, and what it will be is there will be certain costs. So I'm not paying for that because that was going to happen anyway. There is such a shita. It's completely unrelated to this discussion. It's related to a very out there discussion, which I would not have thought to connect the two. But the Gemara says like this: Rav Shimon Yehuda, he's a Tanya. Rav Shimon Yehuda is the one who says, I take future circumstances into account that will be in the natural order. That's the best way I could describe it. The Tanya, Rav Shimon Yehuda, Rav Shimon ben Menashe. We know that if a man rapes a basula, there are certain payments that you have to do. Right? Tsar, ripo, shavis, and all these things. And there's a knas. The question is, do you pay for the pain of the first relations? It is painful. Do you take that pain into account? So let me just say it outside, we'll see it inside. It's very related to this discussion in a very weird way, because that's a pain that she would experience anyway when she would get married. Now the Gemara, by the way, the Chacham are going to say that this is more of a violent way, and therefore, but conceptually, put that aside. Let's say it was the same level of violence, okay? It doesn't seem to be, but let's say it was. So Rav Shimon ben Yehuda says, the guy doesn't have to pay for that. Why? That's going to happen anyway. So it's sort of over here also. It's like I'm not paying for the depreciation of the vine because that was going to happen anyway. It's sort of, do you look at the natural order events? You deprived of the natural order events, but do you look at it when you're figuring out the payments? You look at what will be and say, well, okay, it was going to happen anyway. I didn't deprive you of that. So the Gemara says, a man who violates a woman doesn't have to pay for that pain of the first relations. Why? It was going to happen anyway. So why would I pay for that? That was the pain that was going to be experienced anyway. Meaning, it was going to happen anyway, and therefore, while I'm paying for now, I sort of look at what will be the natural order of events, and I could take that into account. So he would feel comfortable, so this is the same Rav Shimon ben Yehuda, he would also feel comfortable taking into account the depreciation of the vine. Because again, he's saying it's going to happen anyway. So I'll pay for the grapes that I destroyed, but take what will be naturally in the order of events. I'll take that into account. Takes it into account by oinus, take it into account by grapes. Now, by the way, by oinus, the Chachamim agree conceptually to his svara regarding oinus, but they disagree with practicality. They say, they say, if it was the same level of pain, I'd agree with you, but it's more painful. Because it's rape. So therefore, they disagree with him practically. But conceptually, if it was the same level of pain, they would say, okay, fine, I get it, but it's not. So, fine. But the point is, that's Shita. Okay. Amar Rabbi then adds, Hai Tana Rav Shimon ben Yehuda Amar Davar Echad. This Shita of Rav Shimon ben Yehuda, which is that you take future natural things into account when you're dealing with payment for what you did now, that Shita of Rav Shimon ben Yehuda, there's another Tana who also agrees to him. What's the other Tana? Rav Shimon ben Yehuda Hada Amr. We just finished Rav Shimon ben Yehuda Shita, that's regarding the rape thing. But Hai Tana Maihi, what's the other Tana? The Tanya. Let's say we know that if a man, they get into a fight, and he punches a woman, and the stomach causes her to miscarry, so he has to pay the father of the baby the value of the baby. The question is, can he deduct the fact that she would go to the hospital? Right? Medical bills? Right? Am I paying for the full value of the baby? Or can I deduct, if she were to give birth full term, she would have to pay medical bills. So I'm not paying for that. I'll deduct for that. Meaning, let's say the value of the baby is $500. So you have to pay $500. It's not really $500 because there's also medical expenses. So now it's $350. And the Gemara says also pregnant women eat more. So take that into account. The question is, it's sort of a similar shaila of, do you look into future events in the natural order? Say, well, naturally women are going to eat more as they become pregnant. I saved you that money. You're welcome. No. The point is, and there are medical expenses. So, do you take them into account? Rav Shimon ben Yehuda would feel comfortable taking them into account. If you don't feel comfortable, if you look at it sort of like we look at it as if those future grapes are right now, we don't look at the future, natural order. Then you won't look into account the natural order of medical bills of other expenses. You just look at value of the baby. So the Gemara says, the Tanya, Rav Yosi Aimer, Naki Chaya. Rav Yosi says you can deduct the fee of the midwife, because that was a fee that they were going to have if they gave birth. So therefore the value of the pregnancy that you took away from them is not as high, because there was an expense that you also saved them from. Ben Azai Oimer Noki Mizoinus. You could even deduct the extra food. Out of the two, the Gemara is going to point out the bigger chiddush is Rav Yossi. Why? Because not every woman needs a midwife. You're assuming she needs a midwife. Maybe he could argue, my wife knows how to do this on her own. She gives birth without a midwife. So that's a big of a chiddush. The Gemara says, if you deduct the medical expenses, you're definitely going to deduct the food expenses, because everybody needs food expenses. Not everyone needs the medical expenses. There are people that give birth like in a cat, but therefore, for those people, it's the Gemara says, my wife is an expert in giving birth. She won't need a chaya. Okay, fine. The Gemara says, just to finish up this discussion, Rav Papa, Rav Huna, we had yesterday, if a person is mazik biyadayim, do you figure out with the tree? Do you figure out the value of the tree itself? Or do you go with the animal cheshbon, which is the 60 minus, and then the value of the land with the tree, without the tree? The Gemara says, they did practically like Rav Nachman, that they figure out the value of the tree by the shishim cheshbon, not for the value of the tree itself, but rather figuring out the value of 60 parcels of land, deduct it divided by 60, so you get the value of a parcel of land, then you figure out the value of the land with the tree and without the tree. Obviously much smaller. Lishnachrina, some have a different version. Rav Papa, Rav Yeshua, Shamu Dikla, Agav Katina Da'ara, they evaluated the palm tree with a small parcel of land, so they did the land, they did the 60 land, that's what Rashi says, meaning a small parcel of land that held 60, and then you minus with the 60, without, okay, that's fine. Hilchos HaKavasi der Papa, Hunu der Yeshua, Bediklo dar Moi, and the halacha follows them regarding an Armenian palm tree. Hilchos HaKavasi der Reish Galusa, Bediklo Parsa. But the halacha follows the Reish Galusa when it comes to a Persian palm tree. Apparently, Persian palm trees are very, very valuable, and therefore Chazal did not want to be lenient and do the 60. You have to pay for the actual tree itself. Okay. Maisa, the rest of the daf is very easy. Go to the next page. Eliezer Zeira, the young Eliezer, have a Masai Misani Uchma. He was wearing black shoes, which was a sign of mourning. And he would walk around in black shoes as a mourning for the Beis Hamikdash. That was his hanhag. He was standing in the Nardoa Shuk. So officers from the Reish Galusa's house. You have to remember, throughout Shas, the Reish Galusa's house, some Reish Galusas were very frum and erlich, and some Reish Galusas were not very good. It's interesting. This story kind of makes them seem like they're not very good people. Although I will say that the Marsha and the Maram and the Maritzchias like don up of like where the Reish Galusa was coming from halachically, so it kind of sounds like they have some backing. They did not like that he was mourning the Beis Hamikdash, because who are you to mourn the Beis Hamikdash? Is gaiva to dress like you're in mourning? Is abal gaiva? And they put him in prison for this. So you read this story and you're like, well, the Reish Galusa's Rishoim. And by the way, the reason why the Reish Galusa are probably bothered by this is because if you're mourning, like if you're Takar Rasha and you're in charge, and you're mourning over the loss of what was, you're like, well, it's not good now. But the Marsha and the Marim Shik and the Maritzchis, they don up in the Gemara in Brachis that says that you're allowed to not working on Tisha B'Av, right? That Talmidei Chacham didn't work on Tisha B'Av. So the Gemara talks about how everyone can make themselves a Talmid Chacham not to do Malacha on Tisha B'Av. So you're allowed to. They say this is different because you're wearing clothes outwardly. I don't know. The point is that's the Maisa. Eshchad Reish Galusa. Amrle Maishnanim is why are you wearing these black shoes? Amrle I'm Avim Yerushalayim. I'm mourning the Yerushalayim. Amrle they said At Chashiva Lavis Yishama. You say you so chashiv the mourning Yerushalayim. You think such a big tzaddik. Savayuru they thought it was Gaiva Aisiv Chashut. So they put him in prison. Amrle at some point he says Gavarabana. He says I'm a great person. Meaning I am legitimate for what I'm doing. This makes sense. It's on brand. So Amrle Minoyadina. How do we know that you're such a Talmid Chacham? Amrle Atan ba mina milsa. I know ba mina milsa. Ask me a question. I'll ask you a question. I don't know. Ask me, and we'll deal with it. Amrle they said, Boyat, you ask us something. Amrle okay. Haimanda cuts kufra. A person cuts down small little budding grapes. Right. That was the whole discussion we had before. Do you go by what it will be? Do you go by the land? So it's machlokes tanaim. So he said, you cut budding grapes down. My mishal, what do you pay for? So Amrle, mishal make kufra. Well, you cut budding grapes, a pound of budding grapes. Go to the store and pay for a pound of budding grapes. So have a tamri, but he responded, they're going to be ripe though. Why are you paying for? You should pay for what it will be. You cut down the opportunity for that person to get fully ripe grapes. Why am I paying for budding grapes, which is very minimal? You should pay for fully ripe grapes. So Amrlu. So he said. So Amrullah, they said, Mishan Tamri, okay, pay for fully ripe grapes. But Amrullah responded, Halai Tamri Shaglav, I didn't cut down the fully ripe grapes. He's playing with them. Everything that he's saying, they say pay for budding grapes. He says, yeah, but it's going to be fully ripe. So they say, okay, pay for fully ripe, but I didn't cut down fully ripe. And he's playing back with them. So Amrullah, so they said to him, Imlanat, so tell us what's the answer. Amrullah Bashishim. He said, you don't pay for the grapes at all. You figure out the value of the land, and you do the land cheshbon, meaning we don't paskin like Rav Shimon and Rav Yeshua that you pay for the actual grapes. You do the land. So Amrullah, Man Amar Kavasos. So they said, who said that? What's your source? Amrullah, Shmuel Chayu Bezdin Akayim. They said, Shmuel's alive, and his Bezdin is in existence. Ask them. Shadru L'Kayim the Shmuel. They sent to Shmuel. Amrullah, Shaper Karmelu B'Chishishim. They said, that's the psak. The Shavku, and they let him go. Now, Rav Shimon says, Ochla Peres Gemurim. So Rav Shimon Shita is, as we just saw from Rav Shimon ben Yehuda, the name of Rav Shimon, the Rav Shimon believes that we do the land thing if it's unripe. But once it's ripe, you pay for. So if you do unripe like before smada, right? That was the whole smada discussion. So if you lul vegafanim, it's unripe. You destroy 10 pounds of it. You're not paying for 10 pounds of fully ripe. That's when you do the land thing. But if you cut down if you destroy 10 pounds of strawberries, you pay for 10 pounds of strawberries. He makes a distinction. What's his source? My taima. Now, if you remember, yesterday we said, what's the makar of this whole land shtickle? Because there's a beer b'stei acher that you evaluate based on a sada, based on the size of a field. Says the Gemara, it says Shimon, that makar that's only true for things that are growing that still need the land. Meaning, if it's underripe and it still needs the land, then bir b'stei acher. Then you use the land as the evaluation. But if it no longer needs the ground, even though it's still attached to the ground, it's ripe, then you just pay for what it is. So he says, I agree with the cheshbon of bir b'stei acher when it needs the sada. When it needs the sada, then you figure out the cheshbon of the sada. If it doesn't need the sada anymore, meaning it's already ripe, again, definition of ripe, whatever, smada, whatever it is, but if it's already considered produce in halach, it's already considered growing, you don't need it anymore. The Gemara says, that's only if it still needs the field. It's not ready to be harvested. Bahani, these ripe fruits, you have to pay for them. Now, yeah, okay, fine. Says the Gemara, so a new topic. Don Rav Karav Meir. Rav once did an action like Rav Meir. We know that in halacha, like there's different lashonos throughout Shas. Oiri and halacha. Don Karav Meir, he once paskined actively like Rav Meir in the following discussion. Uposak hilchasa Karav Shimon, but he paskined in shir, he would tell people to follow Rav Shimon. So what's the discussion of Shimon Rav Meir? Now, Rav Shimon is the Rav Shimon of our discussion, but what's the Rav Meir? So Don Karav Meir is as follows. Tanya, Kasav l'rishan v'loy chasmalei. Do we have this already? Apparently we have this in Ksubas. I don't know. Apparently we learned Ksubas. The Gemara says, Don Karav Meir, I'm joking. Don Rav Karav Meir, the following discussion. This talks about a woman brings in fields to the estate, so the husband has rights to the usage of it. So if he sells it, he only can really sell it if she signs off on it, because it's her fields. So the Gemara says the following case. Kasav l'rishan v'li chasmei. He had two fields. Again, these fields are set aside for her ksuba payment. So he kasav l'rishan v'li chasmei. So he signed the first one, the v'li chasmei, but she didn't sign off on it. She didn't stamp it. L'sheni v'chasmei. Then the second one she signed off on. So the question is, do we say, well, she forfeited the field, she sold it? Or do you say, no, maybe she could say a taina, I was afraid of my husband's a little violent, and he threatened me, and I was coerced. So the Gemara says, if he sold the first field and she didn't sign off on it, but she signed off on the second of the ksuva, she lost the ksuva. Why? So Rashi says, of the ksuvasa, she can't just say, I'm trying to make my husband happy, because then why didn't she sign off the first one? The fact that she signed off the second one and not the first one means she agreed. If she was just trying to make her husband happy, she would sign off on the first one also.
Why can't she just agree to the second one, not the first one? Maybe she liked that first.
That's fine, but then she doesn't have anything. The first one was sold The first one was sold, but she wouldn't be able to collect from the first one because there was still the second one intact. Right? You always go from the only one that's intact. When she signed off on the second, she can't claim I just did it to make my husband happy. Then why didn't you sign both? The fact that you signed the second, not the first, means you were happy with the sale. That's her Meir Shita. Right? So that's her Meir Shita, and that's, by the way, that's Rav Paskin like her Meir actively. The Chum say no. Rav Yudah and Rav Yudah says no. Maybe she didn't sign off the first because she didn't think it was necessary, and the second she was coerced into signing. So it's possible. Okay, fine. Let's go weiter. That's Rav Meir Shita. Yeah. Okay. Fine. The Gemara continues, and he paskin like Hilchos Rav Shimon. That's our discussion. Ki hadetanan Rav Shimon Omer Achla Peres Gemurim Hashemus Peres Gemur Imsa Asam Sasaim that if you ate fully ripe grapes, you don't do the field cheshbon. You pay for what you do. The rest of the Amid is just a review of what we've had in the past. The Mishnah says Hamagdish b'tayich sadeh chaver shloi b'shus. If I bring in grain into someone else's field without permission, so I bring it into Adam's field without his permission, and his animal eats it, so he's potter. He doesn't have to pay for it. Why? Because why'd you bring it into my field? Im huzke behen, and if the Adam's animal got hurt by my grain, it tripped over the grain, I have to pay for it, because again, I did not have permission to bring it in there. Im agdish b'shus, but if I had permission to bring it in, bala asad chayiv. Then the bala asad is chayiv if he eats it, because he is taking responsibility. He is being like a shomer. Now, if you remember, we had whenever this Mishnah was a couple days ago. Mem Zayin, I knew that. Mem Zayin, the Gemara had a discussion. There was a machlokes Rabbi and the Chachamim. Rabbi Shita is that you do not. This Mishnah is assuming that when Adam says you could bring grain into my field, he's not just giving me permission, he's accepting responsibility. He's being a shomer, and therefore if anything happens, he has to pay for it. That's the Shita of Chachamim. Rebbe Shita is you're a shomer when you accept Shemira. Permission is not accepting responsibility. So our Mishnah, which says that permission is accepting responsibility, is not Rebbe. So the Gemara says, Leima Tanad like Rebbe. Our Mishnah is not like Rebbe. The Gemara says, no, Dika Rebbe. Hamrachi Kabbalah Bala Islishma. Rebbe Shita is granting permission to put something in your field is not accepting Shmira. But this Mishnah says it is. So the Gemara says, I'll tell you why this is different. This Mishnah could even be a Rebbe. Amra Papa, Halcha ben Noter Dari Askina. We're not just talking about me bringing grain into someone else's backyard. Over here, we're talking about a watchman of a granary, meaning that's what he does for a living. So by him granting permission for me to put grain in his backyard, because that's what he does, he sells out, he rents out his backyard as a granary. He watches people's grain. So by him granting permission, if it was a random guy, just Adam Stam wants to do me a favor and let me put grain in his backyard, that's not accepting Shmir. But the whole job is he watches grain for a living. So by him putting it in, it's understood that he accepts Shmir. Even Rebbe would agree to this. The Gemara says, the Kivan Damar I have a Gedish, I have a Ante Lochu, and therefore this is different. One last Mishnah. The Gemara says, we've also had this before. I give a flame or a coal, as we'll see in the Gemara, it's Machlokes Rav and Rish Lakish. I give a fire to a Cher Shayt V'Katan, and they make damage. I am not responsible. I, the one who gave them the fire, I am not going to have to pay in court because it's considered more of a grama. But chayiv b'din shemayim. I am chayiv in shemayim. Hashem is not happy with this because you should not have done that. Shalach bi'apikeach. Now, if I sent the fire in the hands of a person who's mentally competent, then apikeach chayiv. Then the person who made the fire is for sure chayiv. Over here, the problem is the person who made the fire is cheshet v'katas. They can't get them in court. You can't get me either because I didn't do anything. I'm too removed. But b'din shemayim, Hashem knows what you were trying to do. The Gemara says a new topic. Echad hevi esa'ar. One person brings the fire. Echad hevi esa'etzim. And then one person makes a fire. One person brings firewood to make the fire bigger. And then the fire does damage. Who's responsible? Maybe esa'etzim chayiv. The second one is chayiv because by him bringing more wood, it resulted in the fire getting bigger. Then the topic, echad hevi esa'etzim. But if the opposite, one person put the firewood first, and then the second one brings the match. Maybe it's chayiv. It's the second one. So it seems to be it's the second one in both cases, but I guess the second one is the one who really takes it from a small thing to much bigger. If another person came and fanned the flame, Hamalav the one who fanned it is responsible because again, it's whoever basically takes the fire from a small little controlled fire to uncontrollable damaging ability. That's the one who's responsible. Lived haruach, but if the wind fanned it, it was fanned by the wind. Then kulam peturim. I'll just end off with this. We've had this machlokes many times between Rav Yochanan and Rish Lakish, and that is when the Mishnah says that if you give it to a chereshet v'katan and they pater, is it only talking about a case where you gave them a coal and then the chereshet v'katan themselves blew on the coal? So then you legitimately could say, listen, he didn't even do anything because he gave them something that was slowly dying, that was actually not a mazik. Or do you say, even when you handed them a fire, you're still pater? Machlokes Rav Yochanan and Rish Lakish. Says the Gemara, Rish Lakish Chizkiya. When are you exempt from b'dinei adam? Elishamas like achelas v'liba is when you gave a chereshet v'katan a coal, and the chereshet v'katan themselves blew on the coal, so you could say it's the chereshet v'katan's ma'isa, not mine. I gave them something that was slowly dying. It's not like a shar which is mamish, like ready to be mazik. I gave them something that on its own is going out. Avol masli shall have it, but says Rish Lakish, if you actually give a chereshet v'katan a flame, chayiv, then you are chayiv because it's considered memaina. It's like an ox. The same way, if your ox does damage, you're responsible. You're responsible if you gave them a flame as well. My taima, ma'asav kagarmalay, it's considered your ma'asim that caused the fire. Rabbi Yochanan disagrees. Rabbi Yochanan says, no, afila masal shalhaves potter. Even if you gave him a shalhaves, it's potter. Why? My taima tzav the cherish garmalay. You still need the cherish adivakatan to put the fire against the. I didn't do it. So when are you responsible? You're only responsible if you hand the cherish adivakatan the firewood. Salta, the chips, sharga, the flame, you give them not just a fire, but you give them a how-to of how to make a much bigger flame. Then it's considered your maisim, and there you're considered more responsible. I'll stop here.